Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this April 8, 2015 edition of Nightcast. Our opening story for tonight, April 8, comes from Chris Morris, reporting from Athens on the ties that bind Greece and Russia.
A warm welcome at the Kremlin today for Alexis Tsipras, even while the EU locks horns with Russia over Ukraine. But does this careful choreography carry an implied threat that if the Eurozone won't be more lenient with Greece in its hour of urgent financial need, perhaps there are others that might be? There is a long shared history between Greece and Russia, based in part on the Orthodox faith. More important perhaps for people here in this old Athens church than for the confirmed atheist who leads the Greek government. But with his country teetering on the brink in Europe, Mr. Tsipras is testing the boundaries, even if there may be limits to what he can do.
Even Moscow and Beijing do realize that Greece is of more value if it is part of the Eurozone. I don't see the Greek government, despite its difficult financial situation, asking for a loan from Russia.
One thing Mr. Tsipras would like to achieve, an easing of a damaging Russian embargo on Greek fruit exports, imposed as part of Moscow's response to EU sanctions. Any kind of separate Greek deal with Russia won't go down well in Brussels or Berlin. But in this Athens market,
it's very good to finish the embargo and our products to go to Russia. Why to have embargo? We are not enemies with Russia.
So this visit to Moscow will be presented here at home as evidence that this is a government that does things differently. But elsewhere in Europe, if Mr. Tsipras is seen to be cozying up to President Putin, allowing him to play divide and rule, that will be regarded as deeply unhelpful at a time when no one can be quite sure where relations between the EU and Russia. Chris Morris, BBC News, Athens.
Thank you, Chris Morris. Friends, there's more in today's news related to this story. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras did not ask financial aid from Russia during talks in Moscow, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has said. There had been speculation that Mr. Tsipras would seek Russian aid to ease Greece's debt crisis and to put counterpressure from its creditors in the EU. Mr. Putin said Russia would consider loans to Greece for big joint projects, potentially in the energy sector. But analysts say Russia's own economic woes mean any help would be limited. Greece's new government is embroiled in negotiations with the EU and IMF to unblock a bailout package and could run out of funds within weeks. Russia was among Greece's leading trade partners before sanctions on its energy industry, and Greece's own economic difficulties reduced trade between the two countries by 40%. The caption with this photograph, part of this news story, friends, reads, Mr. Tsipras, seen here laying a wreath, was received with pomp at the Kremlin. Mr. Putin called for trade relations to be restored and said the two leaders, between the two leaders. Oh, something's wrong with this statement here. I'm reading to you, friends. Mr. Putin called for trade relations to be restored. And there's some of this, there's a sentence without the whole clause there to it. Putin called for trade relations to be restored and said the two leaders, here it is, the two leaders had discussed various ways of cooperating, including major projects in energy. Under these plans, we could provide loans for certain projects, he said, adding that it was not a question of one of those plans is for a pipeline called Turkish Stream to channel natural gas from the Turkish-Greek border into Greece. Mr. Tsipras received a warm welcome in Moscow, which has seen its ties with the EU strained over Russia's actions in the Ukraine conflict. There had been growing speculation before his visit that Greece would use its relationship with Russia to strengthen its hand in dealings with the EU. In an apparent response to the speculation, Mr. Tsipras said, "Greece is a sovereign state with an indisputable right to its own foreign policy." He also called for an end to the vicious cycle of sanctions imposed on Russia by the EU over its role in Ukraine. European Parliament President Martin Schulz had said before Mr. Tsipras' visit that he should not break with the EU line on sanctions. And then the caption with this photograph, part of this story, friends, reads, Mr. Tsipras and Mr. Putin agreed that they would like to see better trading ties. However, the Greek leader also said the country respected its international obligations. And President Putin denied the suggestion that Russia would use Greece to drive a wedge within the EU. About mythology and Trojan horses and so forth, the question would be valid if I was the one going to Athens, he said. We are not forcing anyone to do anything. According to Konstantinos Philis from the Institute of International Relations, an Athens-based think tank, Russia is not in a position to solve Greece's economic issues. Russia is not and cannot be an EU substitute for Greece. It can only be a supplementary option, he told the Associated Press news agency. And the caption with this photograph, part of this story, friends, reads, Greek fruit farmers saw Russia as a valuable export market until the sanctions imposed last year. And friends, I have an analysis by BBC's Russian service, Oleg Bolrev. He says in his analysis, Alexis Tsipras' visit to Moscow gave ground to lots of speculation, but most of it didn't bear any fruit, not even actual fruit. Greece's agricultural exports to Russia, which stopped after Moscow slapped its own embargo in response to EU sanctions. Before the visit, noises were made about a partial exception, which would bring Greek agricultural producers some hope of restoring exports to Russia. But Vladimir Putin dismissed the idea. After the meeting, the two leaders spoke of hopes for repairing trade, bringing Russian tourists back to Greece's beaches and supplying Russian gas to Greece via a yet-to-be-built pipeline. But it is impossible to predict when the two countries can reap real profits from these ideas. Mr. Tsipras came to power pledging to end austerity, but his plans have met resistance from Greece's EU IMF creditors, who lent the country billions to help it avoid bankruptcy. Greece has not received bailout funds since August last year, with the EU and IMF dissatisfied with the pace of Greek reforms. A Greek repayment of 448 million euros to the IMF is due this Thursday. On Tuesday, the Greek government said Germany owed Greece nearly 279 billion euros, the equivalent of 204 billion pounds or 303 billion Yankee dollars. In war this amount owed, they're claiming war reparations for the Nazi occupation during World War II. It's the first time Greece has calculated what Germany allegedly owes, but Germany says the matter was resolved legally years ago. Reacting to the claim, Economy Minister Sigmar Gabriel said it was dumb, quote unquote, to link Greece's bailout with the question of war reparations. And friends, I've got a story from yesterday's news related to this. This news story asks the question, does Germany owe Greece wartime reparations? And the opening photograph with this one, the Greek government has threatened to seize German property as compensation for Nazi crimes in World War II. And friends, bear with me just a moment. I've got to change our camera setups or we won't be able to close the program out properly tonight. There, I've got it. Okay, so I'm going to pick up there again. The Greek government has threatened to seize German property as compensation for Nazi crimes in World War II. The government says its calculations indicate that Germany should pay nearly, these same figures were in the last news story, but here they are again, same numbers, 279 billion euros, the equivalent of 303 billion American, U.S., Yankee dollars, or 204 billion British pound sterlings. But what does Germany owe Greece, if anything, and why? What are the claims based on? The Nazi occupation of Greece from 1940 to 1944 was among what was the most savage. This news report from today says around 250 people died, mostly from starvation. And the caption with this map, friends, well, it's just a map, and then we've got the next photo with this story shows people suffering. Massacres include the one at, let's go back to that map for a moment so you can see when I mention this. Toward the bottom of the photograph, massacres include the one at Kalavrita, where about 500 people were killed. At issue now is compensation for the killing of 218 civilians in Distamo. You see that in the middle of the map here. Distamo in 1944. In 2000, the Greek Supreme Court ruled Germany should pay 28 million euros. Let me back up for a moment, friends. This was in 2000, just as the euro was coming into circulation. The Greek Supreme Court ruled that Germany should pay 28 million euros, the equivalent of 30 million Yankee dollars, or 19.7 million pounds, to the relatives of those killed, although the decision was not enforced. And the dispute became the dispute effectively reached stalemate in international courts in the following years. Justice Minister Nikos Paraskevopoulos has said he is ready to approve that ruling. And then, friends, the caption with this photo, part of this news story, reads, Greek battle for World War II Nazi war crime reparations. Why is this an issue now? Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras says he has a duty to pursue reparations. He set the tone for his presidency early on by laying a wreath at a memorial to a massacre of Greeks who were killed by German soldiers in Athens. He also raised the compensation issue when he met Chancellor Angela Merkel in Berlin in March. And then, friends, one last photo with this. The memorial in Athens commemorates hundreds of Greeks who were executed by Nazi occupation forces. But Greece's wartime enemy is now its major creditor. Greek relations with Germany have deteriorated in recent years because of the financial crisis, with Germany one of the big contributors to the Eurozone bailout that began in 2010. The new leftist government argues austerity measures should be relaxed, a demand opposed by Germany. It negotiated a 4-month extension to its 240 billion euro bailout in February after tense talks with creditors. How much has Germany paid? Berlin paid 115 Dutch marks to Athens in 1960 in compensation. It was a fraction of the Greek demand, but was made with the agreement that there would be no more claims. Greece says the 1960 deal did not cover key demands, including payments for damaged infrastructure, war crimes, and the return of a forced loan exacted from occupied Greece. Germany insists the issue of compensation was settled in 1990 legally and politically before Germany reunited, and has questioned why Greece did not negotiate when it entered the Eurozone. How much does Greece still want? The new figure of 278.7 billion euros was given by Greek Deputy Finance Minister Dimitris Mardres on April 6th, just a couple days ago. That figure was based on calculations by Greece's General Accounting Office. That total includes 10.3 billion euros that Greece wants as compensation for the forced loan that the Nazis extorted from the Bank of Greece. An earlier estimate of the Greek compensation demand based on a leak was different. It estimated the claim at up to 162 billion euros, that is 108 billion euros for destroyed infrastructure and 54 billion euros for the forced loan. How could the money be reclaimed? The Supreme Court ruling in 2000 allowed for German-owned property to be seized as compensation, though it was never acted on by the then Justice Minister Michalis Strathopoulos. Among possible assets are property belonging to Germany's archaeological school and the Goethe Institute, pictured. They're building the Goethe Institute building, pictured here, friends, a cultural association. And friends, with those two stories, that's it for this Wednesday night report. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Wednesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.